Wikileaks has been divisive from the start, with supporters hailing the group's commitment to transparency and detractors calling it reckless and biased, especially after the 2016 presidential election. Now that Wikileaks founder Julian Assange is reportedly facing federal prosecution, that debate is likely to reach a fever pitch. Adam Riley has more.
For 6 years, Julian Assange has been holed up in Ecuador's embassy in London, fearing extradition and prosecution for publishing massive amounts of classified info. Turns out that fear was well-founded.
I've just been handed a late-breaking piece of news. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been charged under seal.
A development federal prosecutors seemingly revealed by mistake.
While arguing to keep a seemingly unrelated case sealed, they wrote, "No other procedure is likely to keep confidential the fact that Assange has been charged."
If you think WikiLeaks worked to take down Hillary Clinton in 2016, and it's hard not to, you might be inclined to cheer this development.
We're quite happy to have the credit for exposing the corruption and behavior that was occurring in that Clinton team.
But here's the catch. If WikiLeaks faces prosecution for publishing classified information, everyone else could too. As Trevor Timm, the executive director of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, tweeted, "The precedent the Trump administration wants to get against WikiLeaks can easily be turned around and used on mainstream reporters. Hard to overstate how dangerous it would be for press freedom."
I'm a little surprised, Tom, that the administration is going after it at this time. First of all, after all this time. And secondly, for the reasons that Adam stated, that if you go after him, then you're going to be going after anybody who reports data that they got one way or another that is somehow confidential, that they don't want reported.
Well, the issue that always comes up is when you have leaks of any kind, and the WikiLeaks is only one example of that, is what they refer to here as the New York Times problem. When somebody leaks something and it ends up in the New York Times, do you prosecute the New York Times? And then you have the Jim Risen kind of a situation, and it's a very slippery slope. So slippery, in fact, that the Obama administration decided they wouldn't go after it. And, you know, the only thing you can say is, why is Trump going after it? Because he's Trump. And this is all part of his effort to try to chill the press.
You know, I think when the public is looking at these kinds of cases, they'll take sides and be against something if it's not something they agree with, right? But it is. I agree with you in the fact that you have to think about the broader implications of something like this. You may not care anything about him, but you have to think about how this will impact others. And in a perfect world, journalists want to be able to go out, find information the right way, get it through legal channels, whatever it may be, in order to tell your story. But you have to weigh it sometimes and realize, is this something in the public interest? Is it important enough that we need to get it out there? And then that's when you start deciding, okay, how do we get access to this information? No matter where it comes from, you have to weigh it and say, this is important. It needs to get out there, and you use it. And so I think it's dangerous. It could have a chilling effect if, in fact, this goes through.
It's not entirely clear what the line is in some of these cases. Under the Nixon administration, they started down the road of prosecuting the New York Times and the Washington Post over the Pentagon Papers, even after the Supreme Court made its ruling. They abandoned that effort. There have been other similar things. I agree that it would have a terrible effect to go after WikiLeaks, because it's really impossible to make a legal distinction between WikiLeaks and the New York Times. I will
They just don't like him.
Well, I will put in one caveat, and that is WikiLeaks seems to be an active agent of the Russian government. And does that change their legal status? I don't really know the answer to that.
Well, I think the answer is that that's a huge slippery slope, and we can't afford to do that. And I want to just bring up the point that we wouldn't even have known that he was about to be prosecuted if it wasn't some accident,
it was some leak,
some leak and people are like, oh, wait a minute, you're talking about Julian Assange, and it was about some other case, which is even scarier to me. So without that, this could have just proceeded as it would, and the next thing you know, here we are. And I think the more we talk about this and hopefully let people understand why this is important, they can sort of remove the animus toward Julian Assange, because they just roll down the hill and then collect with Chelsea Manning, and then it becomes a whole, oh my God, So it's, there's some real issues here that we have to pay careful attention to.
He needs to face the music. Apparently the rape charges have been dropped because of the statute of limitations. He needs to walk out of that embassy and face the music. See what happens.
Been there 6 years.
That's ridiculous.
Most sentences aren't 6 years.
Apparently he doesn't clean up his room either.
Right.
Well, I think he's going to be there unless Ecuador throws him out.
Well, I think he should walk out. Man up, as they say.
One point, though, I think there's been a lot of little discussion around this, and they talk about the First Amendment right to publish this. People need to remember that the First Amendment only prevents prior restraint from the government. But that doesn't mean that once you publish something, there cannot be consequences. And there can be. The difficulty for the government is coming in and showing what those consequences are and why that was a criminal act.
Exactly.